We're going to get started. Thank you very much for joining us today for the Victorian Live Music Grants panel. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we're meeting on the land of custodians. The people of the Kulin Nation pay respects to their elders past, present, future and emerging wherever they may be. Thank you for joining us for this really important panel. Since the 13th of March, since lockdown, Music Victoria has been meeting with venue owners weekly and relaying their sort of key issues and needs to various levels of government. And one of those key issues was the amount of debt that they were collecting and the assistance that they would need in terms of reopening, in terms of a clear sort of path in terms of social distancing and hygiene rules, and also some support. We're very, very lucky to be living in Victoria, and that Creative Victoria and the state government announced $15 million for live music venues to apply for grants. Hopefully you've seen the guidelines and have seen what you can apply for. We've got two expert grant writers with us today who are going to help you through the process. The deadlines were extended until this Thursday, 5 p.m, as you would have seen, and hence us putting together this panel. All grants through Creative Victoria and many grants through state government were extended because of the upheaval due to stage 4. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our grant writer experts who will be giving you some tips today. So first we have Selene Bateman from Auspicious Arts. Hi, Selene.
Hi.
And we also have Andrew Watt, who's a grant writer, journalist, educator and lawyer with Raven's Nest Consulting. And they are going to walk you through the guidelines and the application process. And we're really hoping many of you will be eligible and will put in applications. And some of you may have already put in applications as well. I'll also introduce Ash Bartlett, who's Music Victoria's Professional Development Manager, who's running the logistics today and the tech. Hi, Ash.
Hey, guys.
And we also have Bonnie Dalton, who's General Manager of the Victoria Music Development Office and who has been Creative Liaison with Creative Victoria for the last few months and was working with the government in terms of designing guidelines. She's on hand today to answer some general questions, but I will iterate that if you have specific questions about your venue's grant application, you will need to contact Creative Victoria. They have 4 grant experts, case study, what am I trying to say? They have 4 experts working on the applications who can take your calls during office hours for every day this week. Ash, can you just put their details up on the screen? This is also being recorded. If anyone's got a problem with being recorded, please don't continue on this Zoom meeting. We will record it and put it up on the website. Thanks, Paris. So if you have a look at the chat room, you'll have a look at the key dates and the contacts. Jack Berryman, Katrina Lee, Sean Gillis and Hannah Schneider. So there are their phone numbers and their email addresses. And if you have specific questions about your application, please contact them during work hours. So the way that we're going to operate today is please keep on mute and ask any questions through chat, and I'll ask those questions at the appropriate time. Selene is going to kick off by going through the grant guidelines so you know what the rules are. And then Andrew Watt is going to give an example of a case study of a mock venue and go through line by line of the application. Then Selene is going to come back on board and go through budgeting and support material requests. And then we'll take questions, more questions from the last 15 minutes that haven't been covered throughout. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Selene, who's going to run through the guidelines. Good luck in these applications. Please contact Creative Victoria before you get too deep into your applications and get them in by 5 o'clock on Thursday. And thank you to Creative Victoria and Minister Foley for helping, hopefully, saving live music in Melbourne and Victoria. Over to you, Selene.
Right. Okay. Now, just sharing my screen. If someone can give me the thumbs up that you can see it, that would be great. Thanks, Patrick. Nice to see some familiar faces here, and thank you for having me. I'm going to go through the guidelines. I just want to acknowledge that the guidelines are quite dry, and so, you know, bear with me, but I just cannot reiterate how important the guidelines are. And I know there's a few people here who have sat in my workshops before, and, you know, I will say it again and again and again. You know, the guidelines are your Bible. Print them out, rewrite them if you need, so they're seared on your brain. But they have all the they have most of the answers to the process and what's required and what you need for your application. If there's anything in the guidelines that you don't understand, as Patrick was saying, that's when you speak to the funding officers, and they can help clarify any points that you don't understand. So it's your Bible. If you haven't printed it out already, I mean, if anyone still has printers, sure, guidelines are about the only time I ever use my printer these days, because it's just, I find it easier to write on them and highlight them. So here we go through the guidelines. Before we do, I just wanted to pop up a few dates here. As people know, this is a very rare grant that you can apply for retrospective costs. That normally doesn't happen. In this grant, you can apply for costs back to the 16th of March. The deadline, as you know, has been extended. We're looking at an October announcement, and the funded period goes to the 31st of January. And then also, it's important to put in your diary, if you're successful, that you will need to do some final reporting, including financial reporting on the grant in late Feb. So, guidelines. So what I've done is I've sort of pulled out most of the guidelines. There's a few things that I have missed out because I've only got 15 minutes to go through them here. But the first thing in the guidelines is it talks about why this grant exists. So the aims and priorities. So, you know, it's pretty simple. Basically, this grant is looking at offering support to music venues, and, you know, you need to be a music venue that demonstrates a history of presenting original live music with good venue staff, performer and patron management practices. So, you know, if you meet that criteria, and then also you're needing assistance, then that's the first boxes that you need to tick, which I imagine most of you are here. If you're unsure about whether your venue qualifies, about being the right kind of venue, again, ring up and speak to someone at Creative Vic, and they should be able to give you a bit of assistance there. So the first section that the guidelines cover is eligibility. So we've talked about the reason that this grant exists, and they've given you a checklist here. Sorry, I think I've got someone else. Has everyone got their mute on?
Please put mute on. Thank you.
Thank you. So for the eligibility, they've got a list here, and I won't read them out there, but while I'm talking, it'd be good if you read through them and to see if you tick all of those boxes. Now, if you tick all but one, again, then it's still worth, don't just discount that this grant isn't for you. Ring up and check with the grants team, and, you know, you might, for example, you know, this is an example Patrick used earlier, but, you know, your one music license may be something that you don't have. If there's any uncertainty, ring up and ask, and there might be a workaround. But basically, you need to be a licensed venue, your primary business model being a live music venue, and be able to show a reduction in turnover. I think that you definitely need a liquor license unless you're a music venue that doesn't sell liquor, and to show that you have a dedicated performance space. So once you've gone through and worked out that you are eligible, you might instantly tick all those boxes and not need to call up. It's also to work out what's not eligible. So there's not really, oh, there you go, unlicensed venues are not eligible. And also there's some venues that receive ongoing funding from the government. So if you're one of those, venues, then you won't be eligible. And I guess the middle one, which is probably the one that maybe is a little bit grey, it's if your business isn't the primary, the live music isn't the primary model for your business. So again, if there's any unclarity there, because you might sell food and you go, are you more food, more music? That's something that you can work out. Now this says here, this is all taken directly from the guidelines. It says, before applying, you are strongly encouraged to speak to program staff. I run a lot of grant writing workshops and I work with a lot of people applying for funding. I would say that you just absolutely should speak to a programming staff. I mean, it's not going to mean that you're not eligible if you don't, but it's just valuable for so many reasons. And also, the people who are on the other end of the phone, although they're not necessarily the ones deciding whether you get the grant, they're going to be in the room while the decision's being made. So it's good to make that connection and that network, and as well as asking them as many questions as you need to get clarity. Okay, so the funding that's available, as Patrick said, there's a $15 million fund, which is quite extraordinary, and yes, how lucky are we that we've got a government that really cares about live music in Victoria. Now, there's 3 tiers of funding that you can apply up to, which is solely based on the capacity of your venue, which I understand will be linked directly to your liquor license. So by having a look at that and knowing your venue, you'll work out which tier that you fit into. Now, another thing, and this is something that I got clarity from Creative Vic, and some of you who were in that workshop for Geelong will remember this, is often when grants are shown, just because it says up to $130,000 doesn't mean that you should apply for that. In fact, quite often in grants, asking for less will make it more competitive. With this grant, that's not the case. Like, they've set these limits because they've gone through the consultation process, have worked out if you're a venue that's 1,200 capacity, then that's the amount of money that they're assuming that you'll sort of need. But we'll talk more about this when we get to the budget stage, but they're the amounts that you can apply up to depending which tier that you fall under. In this section here, I'm not going to read out all the dot points there, but again, this is taken directly from the funding guidelines, which if you haven't already read and print out, you'll be doing as soon as you hop off this workshop. But these are the sort of costs that you can use. And I'll come back to this after Andrew's gone through the portal with you to see what a budget might look like. But again, and also it's really important to note that the costs can go back to 16th of March. So for those of you who have applied for grants before, that's very a unique situation, because normally grants aren't retrospective. And also just an important point to make now is that if you are receiving JobKeeper, you can apply for staff wages from this grant, but obviously not for wages that are already being covered by JobKeeper. But I will specifically come back to this. Now, there's another section here, and this is another area that I would, if I was applying for this grant, that I would bring up and get clarity from the funding body, from Creative Vic, and maybe it's something that Bonnie might be able to clarify in the Q&A section a bit later, is that they want you to have applied for the Commercial Tenancy Relief Scheme, and I believe that's one of the questions. Now, if you haven't applied for this relief scheme, I'm not sure if that goes against your application or not. So that's a good question to, maybe I can ask that one later. But there's other, obviously there's other grants that you can apply for with the Business Support Fund. So if you have applied for that, that's okay, that can go in towards your overall application. But you've got to have a look at, so, sorry, I'm a little bit lost now. The venues receiving funding through the Victorian Live Music Venue Program will not be eligible for funding if you've gone from the CBD or hospitality stream to the Business Support Fund. So if you've got the Business Support Grant, but not under that stream, then you are eligible. But if you've gone through that stream, then you're not eligible. So that's important to note. And then the last thing of what won't be funded is that you can't apply for any capital works where you require a building permit. In the guidelines, they also go through the assessment process, which is just good to keep in mind so you understand the process and of what happens once the grant gets submitted. The first thing that they're going to do is check the eligibility. So it's really important that you've done everything to show that you're eligible for this grant. And when we get to supporting documents a little bit later, when I come back in part 3 of this workshop, we'll go through that in a bit more detail. And then the second thing in the assessment process is that to understand that the applications are going to be assessed by external peers and experts, as well as Creative Victoria staff. And what they're going to be looking at is comparing it to the aims and the assessment criteria. So we looked at the aims earlier of what the program is, and we'll look at the assessment criteria shortly. But also it's important the reputation of your venue is also going to come into play when you're being assessed, which is a fantastic and also quite an unusual way of grants being assessed. If you are successful and get through that stage, you've met the eligibility requirements and you've answered really strongly to the assessment criteria, and you're successful, then there will be some follow-up things that happened, confirming the legal status and identify any adverse findings associated with the applicant. So if you are worried about any adverse findings associated with you or your organisation or business, it's probably a good idea to, again, be upfront about that, have a conversation with Creative Vic, and, you know, see if it is actually something of concern, because if that makes you ineligible, then, you know, this be good to know earlier on in the process. Then the applications may go through some external financial analysis, and I guess that's just because it's a big grant. But if all your documents are true, like when you're, and we'll talk about them more in the supporting materials section, then, you know, don't be too scared by that. And then it will take from there about 8 weeks for them to make a decision, which is a pretty fast turnaround for a grant. Normally it's 12 weeks. So yeah, that'd be fantastic. And I'm sure everyone will be grateful for decisions as early as possible. Okay, so the next section is the assessment criteria. And I'm going to, so Andrew will go, I don't want to sort of preempt what Andrew will go through when he opens up the portal and goes through the questions. But what's really important to keep in mind is that the assessment criteria, if you don't print out all the guidelines, make sure you print this out. And what I do when I'm looking at grants is that I look at the, I look at the assessment criteria, and here we can see that there's 3 areas that they're going to be assessing you against. The significance and contribution of the venue to Victoria's live music industry over time, and there's a bunch of dot points there, sort of extrapolating what they mean by that. The second one is the importance of the venue to a community or region of which the venue is located. And the third is viability and impact. So I'm just going to hop back here. So there's 3 ways that you address the assessment criteria. One is that you answer the questions. 2 is you provide a budget. And 3, you do it through the support materials that you put together. And now, as I mentioned, the assessment criteria, sorry, I'm just going to jump forward. Just to give you an example of how the assessment criteria fits in with the questions, in most funding applications, especially from Creative Victoria, and it's really great how they do this, it makes it a lot easier to tackle it, but the questions that are in the application relate exactly to the assessment criteria. So I'll show you one here. It says, please outline the venue's contribution or value to the Victorian music industry over time. That relates specifically to an assessment criteria that's there. So if you're having trouble answering that question, pull that up and answer those dot points, and that will help you begin to structure your answer. Now, I'm I'm now at a point where the next bits of the guidelines relate to the support materials and budget. So it's at this point you lose me. If there's any burning questions, I realise that's a lot of information, and as I said though, you'll print it out, you'll have it with you, and maybe we can have some questions at the end. But I'm going to hand over to Andrew, and then at the end, as I said, we'll come back and look at the rest of the guidelines.
Thanks, Selene. I might just jump in with a couple of questions that have come through.
Yeah, great.
From Adam Bunny, will the application be looked upon unfavourably if most of the expenditure is pre-project commencement? I think you may have answered that question.
Look, hi, Adam. Look, no, I don't think so. When the budget's being put together, what they're looking for is viability. So if you're, we'll talk more about that when we look at what a budget looks like. But if covering all those costs from March up until August, say, is the difference of making your venue viable or not, then I understand that that's completely fine. Yeah, but what they'd want to show is that enabled you to continue on beyond January. If it only if it filled a hole to get you to August and then you still had to shut down and become insolvent, then no, that would look unfavourable. But if it was the difference of getting you through, then that's okay.
Thanks, Selene. And Paris Martin, hi Paris, has asked around the definition of original live music. The CV website says venues and with DJs can apply and that all genres can apply. The question many nightclubs have is that they are a music venue where their focus is music and DJs who are playing tracks that are modified by the DJ who is performing live. Can there be some clarity around those venues' eligibility? And if so, can that section be updated? So the feedback that we've had from Creative Victoria is you won't be disadvantaged. All genres are eligible, and there will be a selection of an industry assessment panel with experts in certain genres, including electronic music and DJs. And rather than be prescriptive, state your case for how this is original live music. So certainly eligible, yes, and state your case for how your venue promotes original live music, and modification of songs is part of this. And there will be expert assessors on board who have expertise in this area. And also, if you have any questions, once again, just run it past the Creative Victoria grants team. Jack, to everyone, what kind of evidence record should you demonstrate wage and workplace regulation compliance?
My understanding from that is that you don't necessarily have to show that now, but if you're successful, then there's a good chance that they're going to want to see that. So those records would be then from what your bookkeeper would have showing, I guess, or your BAS or other, tax returns. You should have all that information on hand. So if you've been paying people cash in hand, or if you've been paying bands at $50 instead of proper rates, then that's going to be a problem.
Okay, thanks, Selene. And is there any indication of roughly how many venues will be applying? Creative Victoria doesn't release those kind of details. So no, I don't think there's any indication. Bonnie, would you add anything to that?
No, I mean, I know initially the Music Victoria had some ideas, and Save Our Scene had some ideas about how many might be applying. But at this stage, they're basically what you said, Patty. No one will be able to say it, but I would say that if you think you're eligible, don't be put off by the fact that I know some people were talking about it is competitive, and it is, but certainly, the idea behind $15 million is quite a lot of money, and the idea behind that was to ensure that everyone who is eligible and really should be funded. So don't be put off by that question. If you are eligible, just apply.
Yeah, there's a lot of money going around, and this is taxpayers' money. It's the community's money, and the community has said very clearly and taxpayers that live music is absolutely vital to cultural and social and economic health of the state. So please, for the good of the state and the music fans and the musicians, you have a responsibility to apply and get as much money as you can. What if I've already lodged my application before finding out about the extension in this workshop and needed to amend, improve my application? Bonnie, are you happy to answer that? I'm not sure where Bonnie's gone. I believe that you can't reopen your application, but there are some opportunities to send some additional information through a Word doc. And I believe everyone who's made their application would have been sent that information.
Yes, correct. Sorry, Patty, just had a little homeschool situation. Yeah, that's the case. And if you didn't receive an email, again, just reach out to the grants team on those contacts that are up above. There is a process. You can't physically reopen your application, but there is a process to be able to submit a bit of extra information if you felt that you needed to, and if you had submitted before the due date.
Yeah, so certainly if you get any great tips from Selene and Andrew in the next 45 minutes, feel free to add some additional information. So we're going to move on to Andrew Watt, who has invented a new hypothetical venue just for us today. So over to you, Andrew. What have you called your venue?
Actually, I've got no idea what I call my venue. I called my applicant Pub in Need Proprietary Limited. I don't know what the name of the venue is actually, but I just stuck it in under the company name. Is everyone seeing that screen? Good. Okay, so we'll jump through some of the early parts fairly quickly because it's pretty obvious. You're just filling in your name and address, etc. Just before I get started on this though, just a couple of things. This is unique. This is not a normal type of grant, particularly for Creative Victoria. Creative Victoria, traditionally is about, supporting innovation and creation of new work and, all of that sort of, beautiful, fun stuff. This is not about that. This is about survival. So there is an extent to which they're kind of making it up as they go as well. So you can expect a little bit of flexibility in that, they've never had to do this before. Dare I say it, we are in unprecedented times. So, they are realistic about it as well. Not that I've, got any particular inside information, but they will be realistic about it that, okay, the assessment criteria they have made up for the first time. The eligibility criteria they've made up for the first time. So the questions about, but what about electronic music and where does the DJ fit in?
Yeah, you can.
They are, making this up as well. So I think the overriding principle here is that you just need to give yourself the best shot. You need to tell your story. And if there is something about your venue that you think addresses a particular criteria, put the magnifying glass on that, amplify, which, live music venues should be good at, amplify what's good about your venue that makes you feel, in your gut that you are worthy of this sort of support. Bring that information out, amplify it, reiterate it, and really put your best foot forward. At the previous workshop, that was the message that I got loud and clear from the Creative Victoria personnel there was state your best case, give yourself the best chance. So, obviously one way of giving yourself the best chance is to address the criteria. That's a given, but also be a little bit creative in the way that you allow yourself to really explain yourself. So, we'll talk about budget later, but for example, when you do your budget, you're undoubtedly going to look at your budget and go, I hope they know what I mean. Well, attach some notes, tell the story of your budget. And the person assessing it will then go, I get it. I know where they're coming from. So in all of these things, my sort of underlying theme is make sure you're telling your story. because your story is unique. Every venue story is unique. So that would be my first consideration. So jumping into the section here, what I've done is I haven't just written the grant application for this fictitious venue, because there is a vast difference from venue to venue. Every one of you is different to the next venue. But I think the question of outlining your venue's contribution is that you start to tell your story right at the beginning. Don't assume that the panel necessarily knows your venue. They might, if it's the, I'll pick out a couple of obvious examples. If it's the, Corner Hotel, sure, probably every music person in Victoria will know the Corner Hotel. Most of the people reading your application, they may well know your venue, but they don't know it as well as you do. They don't know the intricacies of your venue. If there is a particular group of people or a particular genre of music that you specialise in, 2,000 characters is not a lot. So be aware that, if you try to do a list of every band that's played at your venue, 200 bands with a 10-character title, there's your 2,000 characters gone. So, don't just do a list of who's played there. If you have longevity on your side, emphasize your longevity. If you've been around for 20 years, 15 years, 10 years, emphasize your longevity if that's your strong suit. Obviously, the continuity of live music presentation is important. If you're able to say, we have consistently presented live music 3 days a week, 5 days a week, every weekend, whatever your true story is, if you're able to say that and that you've done it for 5 years, for 10 years, you didn't have a break, the venue didn't sort of switch out and become a pokies venue and then come back again, God we wish. Continuity is important. You're not expected to be the Bureau of Statistics. Yes, the number of people that you employ, the number of shows that you have come through, and each show on average, engages 15 or 20 music industry personnel. Great, mention that. But you are not supposed to be the Bureau of Statistics and telling them, the economic value of live music to Victoria. They know that. You don't need to restate the obvious there. We know that live music is important to Victoria from an economic perspective. Don't waste your 2,000 characters restating that. So begin to tell your story. But again, as Selene was saying, keep referring back to the criteria. All right. So then
just a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Just firstly, a bit of clarification in terms of what if you are eligible for the Victorian Government's Nighttime Economy Business Support Initiative, you can't apply for these grants. That's a $40 million grant that was for venues that are part of a larger conglomerate with a turnover of over $50 million. But if you have access to the Business Support Fund, which was the $10,000 one and now $5,000, then that's fine. We've had another question from Craig Carrick. Is it encouraged to submit a supporting doc to tell your story in more than 2,000 characters in the portal, Andrew?
I would.
Yes.
If that's what it takes to fill in the gaps, if that's what it takes to string together your story, what will inevitably happen, you'll write this, and as I said, 2,000 characters is not a lot. You'll address these 4 questions and your gut will be saying to you, I still don't feel like I've adequately explained ourselves. The emphasis at the last workshop from Creative Victoria was make sure you explain yourself, put your best foot forward, state your case. So if that means you do a supporting declaration of some sort, or if you allow your letters of support to flesh out some of the things that you may have alluded to in these 2,000 characters. Don't just get, and we'll talk about letters of support later, but don't just get the same letters of support. So-and-so is a great venue and we've played there and it's a really great place and they look after their musos. Get a couple of those because they're good. But, if you do, and this is relevant to this section here, if you are the epicenter in Melbourne for, the reggae-infused Peruvian folk music, if that's your genre and you are the, key venue for that in Melbourne, or if you are a regional venue and you're one of the few live music providers in that region, if there is something about your venue that means that you provide live music for a particular genre or group of people or physical location or region, are you in fact an important stop on a national tour circuit in a particular genre? So, there's a bunch of venues that specialise in a particular genre. They form the Melbourne leg of, a whole bunch of national or, maybe even international tours. So say that you're the particular community doesn't have to be a demographic as such. It could be genre based. It could be that not only do you play a particular style of music, but as a pub, people who are into that style of music, this is their home. This is their home away from home. They come to your venue, they hang out, they treat it as their lounge room. Well, that's important. Whether it's experimental music, whether it's electronic music, and that's where I think when you are talking about electronic music, there's so many genres and subgenres of electronic music, and if you're able to describe your venue in a way that you go, oh wow, okay, if this venue was not here on the other side, there is actually going to be a loss to a particular part of the community. I think you're going a long way to telling your story. So, community is such a good word when we talk about music. And so if you are able to get the message across that the survival and reopening of your venue is going to provide a community meeting place for a particular, genre, age group, whatever it might be, that's part of your contribution to a particular community. So, it's hard because as a venue operator, you are probably totally focused on doing what you do. You get the doors open every week. You walk away from another weekend and go, there's another weekend that we got through. And you're so focused on that you sometimes need to step back a little bit and go, well, what makes us important? What makes us unique? What makes us special? And as I keep saying, amplify that. Amplify what is unique about you. Your benefits to allied businesses. Clearly, if you're a music venue that sells beer, you benefit the beer businesses. Well, great. You sell Jack Daniels, you sell Furphy, whatever it is. Everyone does that. So this particular section, of course, you're going to say, yes, live music brings people to our venue to eat. So that means we have suppliers that, are not supplying us at the moment because there's no live music because the pubs are not open. But most venues are going to say that. So I would try to suggest in this section, it's about the volume of your live music. How frequently you do it, how long you've been doing it, how many shows per week on average, but you get to say that anyway in the other questions. My feeling is that you may not need your full 2,000 characters in this section because most people will obviously say, all right, we have live music and that means that booking agents get a commission and managers get a commission if there's booking agents and managers involved. And of course, musicians get paid and guitar techs get paid and a front of house person gets paid. That's sort of a given. So don't don't feel the need to be the Bureau of Statistics on that one either, and analyse the economic trickle-down effect of every time you put a live show on. I think most of that is going to be fairly common. In regards to this question of, is live music your primary business model? We know for a pub, your primary business model is selling beer, or hospitality, beer, food, whatever, and that live music is the draw card that brings people in that are going to drink your beer. So the fact that you have food won't be held against you. It's whether you genuinely use live music as your draw card, as opposed to poker machines or bingo nights or stand-up comedy or all of the trivia nights or whatever. All of the things that lots of venues do to bring people in. Is live music your thing? And if you're able to sell that story, and let's face it, it either is or it isn't. So if you are here thinking, okay, there's a grant available for live music venues, I'm not really a live music venue, but maybe I can get my finger in the pie there, or my nose in that particular trough, you might have a hard time. It is intended for live music venues. So, the fact that you also sell food and you also sell beer is not going to hurt you. You don't have to be just a live music venue, but is it a significant part of your product, your mix? And if it is, if you were able to say, okay, if we stopped having live music, we would not be the venue we are, there's a good chance, assuming you tick all the other important boxes, that you will be eligible. So, don't be disheartened by the fact that you're not, 7 days a week, 5 shows, 5 bands per night, live venue. You're still in the running and have a throw at the stumps, but give it your best chance. This final one is really an interesting one. Explain your venue's scenario plan for safe and effective staging. This is not a grant that's just come up because suddenly, the state government or the federal government or, somebody else has had an epiphany about the significance of live music. This is here because we're in a pandemic. So I think it's important that you show that you have a knowledge of safe and effective staging of live music guidelines. I know, what is it? Live Performance Australia published just today a new set of, guidelines for the safe staging of live music. I saw it on themusic.com.au or one of those today. Have a look at those and say, all right, we're going to read those and we're going to abide by them. Understand what the new normal may mean for your venue. Anything that you've done between sort of March 16 and now that shows a real commitment to continuing live music. So if you might have got it into your head to do some live streams when, you're able to do live streams, tell them that, hey, we've maintained a connection with our community by doing live music, live streaming or whatever the case may be, if you've done that. And I know, some venues have. When we're talking about the reopening guidelines, we don't know. Nobody actually knows when you're going to reopen, whether it's going to be a staged, gradual process to reopening, which we assume it will be. It won't be, one magic day when we're all told to get back on the beers. It'll be gradual, it'll be slow, it'll be cautious. So, you don't need to say, okay, on January 1, we're going to have this band and this band and this band, and on January 2, we're going to have our, return to rock live music festival or whatever. There isn't an expectation that, you'll be booking shows and sending deposits out to agents and things like that. So there is scope for you to be non-specific, but just show how you are thinking in terms of a return to live music as an important part of what you do. If you are a venue that says, hey, we've had this great idea, we're going to start live music, you know, the moment we're allowed to, we've never done it before, but we're going to start now, you're probably going to struggle. You know, this isn't intended for the stimulus to reopen or to open new live music venues. It's really about maintaining the ones that are there and giving them a fighting chance to, you know, get back and be able to deliver what they've been delivering going into the future. So, you know, I wouldn't suddenly, you know, as a pub announce via a $100,000 grant application, hey, we're going to start doing live music. That'll probably not be seen too strongly. I feel it's important somewhere in here, and again, this could be in your support documents or it could be here, but keep in mind, 2,000 characters is not a lot, that you have some sort of statement regarding the sustainability of your venue. It comes up a couple of times in the criteria. It says, you know, that you want it to be eligible, you have to be solvent. You know, that's kind of important. The intention of these grants, in the words of the guidelines, is venue stabilisation (brackets solvency). So don't ignore that. You need to be able to show that you're a realistic chance of being here on the other side. And that needs to come into play with your budget, but it also needs to come into play with the way you explain yourself. $15 million sounds like a lot of money, and, you know, it is. But typically Creative Victoria grants are, you know, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. $20,000 is a big grant for most artistic projects. This is not an artistic project. So Creative Victoria, when they're saying, hey, we're saying 80,000, 100,000, 130,000, it is substantial amounts of money. And I know it's a weird kind of world that you guys are in, that, you know, you go, all right, well, you know, I own a pub and the pub's been shut and it's going to be shut for a few more months yet. And realistically, $100,000 isn't going to be the difference, you know, between I'm going to have to find another way and I'm going to maybe have to chip in myself or whatever. You know, we know it's not going to be, you know, easy. $100,000 won't put you all on easy street. We know that. Well, not we, I'm saying Creative Victoria would know that. So you need to get across that you recognise that this is important, that it's could make a difference to your viability. It could make a difference to your sustainability over the shutdown period, that it will go a long way to keeping you in with a fighting chance to be there on the other side. Because, you know, it remains government. And, you know, there is a state opposition as well. And we've all seen how governments are put under the blowtorch, you know, with regards to grants and, you know, where grants have gone and things. You have to give the state government an opportunity here to be able to say, all right, this was a worthwhile $100,000. They're not going to want to give $100,000 to a venue who takes that, pays a few bills, and then falls over, you know, a couple of weeks later. So you need to show that you have a plan that is going to contribute to your a really high chance of you being around on the other side. You need to show that community return on that money. So challenging. It's a challenging thing to do, but I think you need to show that your plan really is viable and realistic. And if you can do that, I think you're a long way to ticking the boxes on this one. So, if you wanted the magic words that were going to make your grant application successful, there is none. But as Selene said, please keep coming back to your to the prerequisites or the conditions, the intention. Keep going back to your significance over time, your importance to a particular community or region, and keep going back to how this money is actually going to help you achieve the aims of this, and that is long-term sustainability. It's really is a storytelling exercise. Okay, then we jump forward to venue and business information. These are all drop-down menus. You don't have, a whole lot of scope to put your personality or put your personal story in this section. It is what it is. These need to be filled in. Obviously, I haven't filled them in because my venue isn't real, it's make-believe. But importantly, these should match the figures in your P&L. If you haven't started talking to your accountant, you need to start talking to your accountant pretty quick, because you do have to put a profit and loss in, and it does need to be accurate. And, all of your accountants have professional responsibilities, that they're not just going to throw anything together and go, this will do. They're going to be obliged to get it right as well. So again, tick the boxes. You're only allowed 3. In this case, I tick the box all because my fictitious venue, we're very versatile down here at Dead End Street. So, that's just the way it is. But if you are particularly powerful in a genre, do that, etc., etc. This is all financial information. So then close project activity area. Again, there's no scope there for you to tell your story. It's tick the boxes. It is what it is. And then you get into budget. So with budget, well, obviously I'll head back to Selene on that one, but I think, there is no silver bullet. There is no, easy answer. But be prepared to really, I don't want to sound too, new age about it, but reach into the DNA of your venue and explain yourself. Really let them know why, you need to be here on the other side. And if you do, I think you'll go a long way to ticking the boxes.
Thank you, Andrew. Have you finished your section there?
Yeah, pretty much. So, I mean, I might jump in a little bit when we talk about supporting documents as well, because, I think they're an important tool of telling your story.
Sure. Thank you, Andrew. we've just got a couple of questions you might be able to help us answer.
Yeah.
One is, will there be a difference in assessing venues that are completely relying on music compared to pubs that mainly rely on food and beverage sales?
I mean, I don't know the answer to that. That's a question for Creative Victoria. My feeling is that what they're trying to do, and again, keep in mind, they're making it up as they go as well on this because it's not been done before. I think they're trying to weed out the ones who, are essentially a venue that, operates on a pub tab, chicken parmesanas and poker machines, who maybe on a Saturday afternoon have, an acoustic guitarist in the sports bar. I think they're trying to say, well, this is not really for those venues. If music is original live music is the engine room that brings people into your venue to drink your beer and eat your parmesanas, well, that's what they're looking to support. That, it is I think there'll be enough to go around so that you don't have to just be a 7 nights a week, 5 bands per night live music venue. I think it'll go beyond that, but I think where it will stop short is if, live music is sort of a little add-on to your, pot and palmer operation.
Thanks, Andrew. I should point out that any questions that were asked in the previous information sessions have been added to the Q&A section on the website. So there's quite specific questions and answers around One Music licenses, electronic music, new venues applying, what of my venues receiving other support. So a lot of your questions might be answered there. We've got a couple of budget questions here, which we might save for Selene because she's about to go into the budget section. Paris is, it's a long question. I'll summarise it. Paris is asking if there's likely to be further funding, considering that the advocacy done by Music Victoria and Save Our Scene was based on venues being closed up until July, but it might not be back to normal till next year. We just don't have an answer on that, Paris. But as you know, certainly our proposals for some funding were based on the losses and debt incurred per month. So certainly we have those figures and they are with the government as well. So we just can't predict the future. Let's get these grants out now, and if further support's needed, we can put that case to the government in future.
I think it's fair to say that if there is a clear and obvious demand for these grants, that will go a long way to saying that they were a good idea. So
yes, definitely all apply. We definitely need this $15 million to be used up, so they know that there's a demand for it. Another question was, I also just wanted to point out that Music Victoria and the VMDO and Sally Mather from the forum have written a guidance note for reopening. So Music Victoria, every week we were writing a new practice note, guidance note or best practice guide for operating with 100, then 50, then 20. And so we kept on providing that sort of advice based on the government guidelines. We have written a guidance note and released it on our website. Bonnie's put it up here. It's called Guidance Note, and that is basically hygiene and social distancing requirements for reopening. So when we get a bit closer to that, hopefully not too far away, please use that as a guide, and you can refer to some of the best practice or the guidance in that document when you outline how you plan to reopen. We might pass it over to Selene here, and Selene, I might we'll let you get started about on the budget section, and then we might answer some of these questions if they haven't been answered in your presentation. So thank you very much, Andrew. And Andrew is available as a grant writer if you do want to hire someone to write your grant this week. We've got our grant writers on the Music Victoria website page, which I'll put up shortly. So if you need some help, he is available. So we'll pass.
Just briefly, Andrew is a little bit busy too. So jump in soon if you think I can be of some use to you, because it's Thursday's looming.
Yep. Selene, can we just answer Desiree's question before we get into the budget, please? So it's around the commercial tenancy rental scheme. Mm-hmm. Desiree says that their landlord applied for the rental scheme on their behalf. What evidence do you need to submit to support or show this, that you've actually applied for the rental scheme?
Oh, I might give you the wrong answer here. I think that you just need to say that you've done it and that there's the trust that you have. And then if it's not one of the requisites that you have to prove, but it might be something that they look at if you're successful, and then they do a financial analysis. So I don't think you have to prove anything at this stage. But Bonnie or someone else might have a better answer than I have.
Just in terms of the rental scheme, it's essentially there to support venues with rental assistance, as it suggests. They also have a mediation service I'll put up the link on this website. And if you are struggling to negotiate rental relief with your landlord, then there is a lot of information, and there's a helpline, Small Business Victoria, and they have a free mediation service. So before you wring each other's necks or give up, please contact Small Business Victoria. I'll put the link up in a sec. Over to you, Selene, and we'll once you finish your presentations, we'll try and address the rest of these questions. Thanks.
Okay, great. I'm just checking you can see my screen again. Yep, great. I'm actually going to start with support materials, and I'll go over to budget. So just jumping right in, because I want to leave lots of room for questions, because I think questions are the best, the most important part. With the support materials, like Andrew said, they are just they're almost more important than what you put into the boxes in the question section. So, for example, when I've sat on assessment panels, the first thing that I do is I go and look at the support materials, and especially if there's some visual support materials, whether that be a short video or images. I mean, it makes sense. They're just so much easier to absorb and to tell a story. And Andrew said, if you're not able to tell your story in that 2,000 characters in the first question, then rather than writing a longer description of telling your whole story that the assessor sits there and read, think about how you might be able to put that in a visual form. So you might get someone to interview you, you might get some, some very short vox pops, like Andrew was saying, if you're, the home of where all the punk bands play and, no one else offers that, get people to speak on your behalf. You can cut a video together, and that's a way of sticking in people's minds. So I know you don't have much time. It doesn't have to be high end and fancy. It can be, text 10 people that you know that could do you a fantastic 10-second snip, and they can do it on their iPhone, cut it together. It's a really, really powerful way of showing how important your venue is and your passion. So, I'd really recommend thinking of ways that you can do that. Anyway, going through the required support materials: liquor license, one music venue license. Hopefully they're things you've got on hand and are easily organised. Now, the financial documents, these you do need to get your accountant or your bookkeeper involved in those. They might be things that you have on hand already. If they don't, then probably the first phone call tonight or tomorrow morning would be to speak to your accountant to get those documents in order. I did see a question, I thought, in the chat where someone said, what if you had a negative, that the portal won't take a negative number? I don't know the answer about that. You'll have to check in with Creative Vic. Next thing is you need to show evidence of your space. So you might have specs on hand that you send out to bands when they want to play at your venue, in which case you can upload those. If you don't, a simple photo showing your venue or a couple of photos, you should be able to give that information across pretty quickly. Now, a budget is the last piece of required support material. Now, normally in the Creative Vic portal, there's a section where you fill out all the boxes in the portal. To make it a bit easier, they've just allowed you now to upload a budget in the support materials. I'm going to go through an example budget when I finish on the support materials. You can use Creative Vic have a budget drafting tool. I've got to confess, it's good. It's not my favourite tool, so I've used my own, and also just to make it fit neatly on the screen. They don't mind. You can use their tool. You can use your own. We'll go into that a bit more. So the last two pieces of support material, they're not required. However, I cannot strongly recommend enough that you include these two pieces. So letters of support, they can be, here, relevant industry professionals or peers. They could be, I would try and get a mix. Don't just have them all from bands or all from punters or all from, music scene luminaries. Try and get a mix of those. And then also, think of some creative ways. It doesn't have to be a written letter. It could be, ways that you could, so sorry, I skipped over marketing and media portfolio. That is a required support material, and that could be a link to your website if your website tells your story really well, or your Facebook page. But I would really think about cutting something together here. If you've got some, you know, some great footage from some gigs, or photos, if you've got time, put something together that's really, you know, sells your story, and if not, then links to event pages and things like that will certainly satisfy that requirement.
Selene, could I just jump in very quickly there? Just something I thought of.
Yep.
With your letters of support, Patrick will be pleased that I make this announcement. Please don't ask Music Victoria for a letter of support.
Yes.
Then the reason why is that if everyone asks Music Victoria for a letter of support, they cancel each other out anyway. It doesn't enhance your application relative to anyone else. And, you know, all it means is that the very overworked staff at Music Victoria spend the next 3 days basically writing the same letter for everyone. So, yeah, just as a public service announcement for Paddy and his team, maybe cancel that one out.
Thanks, Andrew. And yeah, I would take some cues from the real priorities in this application guidelines. Your contribution to the ecosystem, your support for musicians. So I'd definitely be getting a support letter from a musician, and particularly if you're in a particular region or support a particular style of music, how you are a meeting place and support that ecosystem, particularly in the regions. And there might be a tour promoter who can provide a support letter to emphasise the importance of your venue in the on the regional touring circuit that helps that whole circuit. So yeah, take some cues from the priorities in the guidelines for which support material.
Yeah, and in a moment too, my next slide is some tips about how to go about getting good support letters. The final thing in the support materials that's not required is, and this sort of relates to that fourth question around scenario planning. So, you know, this is an opportunity to expand a little bit on that. I also want to really acknowledge the fact that, you know, it's really hard when we don't know what's going to happen next. Like but remember, everyone's in that boat, and the assessors are going to be really aware of that, you know. Sure, we know we're going to be shut till September. I think Paris brought it up before that, you know, are these restrictions going to be something that we're living with for the next years on and off? Like, you know, acknowledging that we don't have those answers, but no one has. So then think about, you don't necessarily have to submit a business and a health and safety and a programming engagement plan, but, you know, if one of those is more pertinent to you than another, think about doing something in a bit more detail if you have time. Now, obviously, with a few days up your sleeve, I mean, I know there's a few people in this workshop who have been working on their application for a while now. But yeah, if you can, try and get something in there. And there are some fantastic resources from Music Victoria and the BMDO that have, you know, that you can refer to. So I'm just aware of time, so I'm going to just skip ahead to, yeah, with support letter tips, request early. Hopefully you've already got that in motion of who you're sort of targeted to give you support letter. Be strategic who you ask, as has already been mentioned by Andrew and Pat. Don't necessarily ask all bands, try and get a range of people to provide support letters. Be really clear about why you're asking them for a support letter. Like there might have been a specific gig or a specific time, or, you know, so if you let them know, I don't know how it is, but I've asked for references before and they'll go, yeah, sure, just write it and I'll sign it. You obviously don't want that. You want them to write it. So make it easy for them to write it. You could provide some dot points. There might be 3 specific reasons that you're asking them, tell them what they are, and then it's much easier for them to write that letter for you. Now, I'm just going to skip right now into budget because we are getting pretty close to time and I don't want to cut too much into question time. With the budget, I'm coming back to this part of the guidelines where it tells you the sorts of things, costs that they'll meet. What I've done is I've just done up a dummy budget to show you what it might look like and to talk through. Sometimes, and other people in this group, we put a budget together as a group, a bit hard with 92 people in the room. So anyway, so I've just made some little notes here. I'm a 120 seat venue. I'm counting on the fact that we're going to be closed at least till September. I'm not going to look at booking bands until December, January. For 3 nights a week, I'm looking at being funded. I'm asking for funding between October and January, plus some back rent and utilities to July, because I managed to cover those things up until then. Now, because I'm a 120 seat venue, I can apply up to 80, I think. Well, I got that right. But I've worked out that 65 will get me through. I've received the $5,000 business support grant. I'm getting JobKeeper for my staff. I'm relying on that, you know, the nights that I'm open, that I'll sell drinks around that, and then I'll sell tickets of about 14 grand. Now, when you're putting a budget together like this, don't worry, it's an estimate. So it may look very different by the end of it, but what you're trying to show is something that's viable. And another thing with your budget, and I think Andrew mentioned this before too, tell a story with your budget. Your budget should match your application. They should support each other and tell the same story. Now, you can provide lots and lots of notes. When I'm putting a budget together, I try and have as many of the notes in as fewer words as possible right next to it, so that when the person's assessing the budget, you're not there to answer any questions. So I can see here, how have I come up with that $25,000? I've gone, well, if I'm assuming 30 people a night and they spend $35 on drinks over 8 weeks and 3 nights, that's how I've calculated that figure. Then down here, I've sort of gone through and, you know, I've got figures in here for my rent, saying that I'm asking for July to January at $4,000 a month. I've got insurance, utilities. I'm going to get some business planning, which hopefully will tell the same story when I talked about what in that question 4. Now, this is something to keep in mind. If you're getting a grant over $40,000 from Creative Vic, you do have to get it audited. So I put into an audit fee, and then I've got accounting, bookkeeping fees. If you go down here, you can see I put in my marketing costs, and then in my notes, I've sort of said, you know, that I've either got a quote or that I've based them. For example, 1,500 should get me 4 sets of either ads on PBS or Triple R. Now, all my staff are on JobKeeper, and I'm assuming that that will keep everyone going. But you can see up again in my income section, I've sort of made a note, you know, like calculating how I came up with those fees, given that JobKeeper is going to decrease and decrease again. I'm going to do some venue modifications, which I've listed here, and then I need to buy beer to sell it. So, and then also here, I'm going, well, I'm hoping to do 3 gigs a week over 8 weeks over December and January, should everything go to plan. And so I'm saying that I want to have $1,000, so I should have put that in there, that it's $1,000 for each band as an artist guarantee, which they'll get whether the gig's cancelled, goes ahead or not. So that sort of gets my final figure down here to 158,000. And then with Creative Victoria, this is something you always have to do. You have to show how you're going to spend their grant. So I've made another column here, and I've listed the things that I'm going to spend their grant on. So I've sort of got like a mini budget next to my big budget. Budgets always, when you're applying for grants, always have to balance to 0. And I think I saw a question earlier on about profit. If you end up making more than that, you don't have to give the grant back, that's fine. But it's just, the budget is also telling the story of viability. The things that you want is you want really clear notes. You want it to tell the same story as in your application. You want it to balance to 0, and you want it to show that it's viable. And that viability is just absolutely essential in that time. Like, and your other financial documents will tell that story too. I know it's a very quick snapshot of what that will look like, and you may look at that and go, well, that's not what our costs would be, but this is just an example to give you a sense of what it should look like. I've done a mix. I'm looking at funding everything except, you know, rent. I need to get some retrospective rent paid. So if you can get quotes, that's great. If not, you don't have to necessarily include them, but if you can say that you've got a quote, then the assessor's going to trust that you're not just making up figures. I suggest doing the budget first if you can, although in the next few days I think you'll be doing everything all at once. It's really important that it balances to zero. Again, check that your budget supports your application. That often happens that they tell different stories. Try to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay, so I'm going to stop there because we've got 9 minutes and I think it's important that we throw open to questions.
Right, thank you so much, Selene. We've got a couple of budget ones here which you may have already addressed in your great presentation. I'll just read some of them out. From Clint Fisher, if we show profit in budget, will they take that profit amount off our grant total? Is the answer there that there'll be no profit shown?
Yeah, don't show profit. So that's right. If you've got a profit showing, then you're showing that you don't need the grant. So it's sort of a bit funny because Creative Victoria, as Andrew said, are used to working in project funding, and this is business funding. So even though it seems odd, you shouldn't, definitely has to balance to zero, and you can make that work.
Right.
Doesn't mean you can't have profit or surplus in your business, just not in this budget.
And that'll be the same with Craig's question. What about negative dollar figures in expenses and revenue? Portal doesn't allow.
Yeah, I did see Craig's comment before, and I think what he meant is when you've got to put in each quarter, if it's a negative amount, the portal doesn't let you put negative numbers in there, which is something to follow up with Creative Vic. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, thanks. We've got some more general questions. So Andrew and Bonnie, feel free to jump in if you have a good response. This is from Sasha Jansen. The questions: is your project aimed at a specific audience or group of participants that identify as tick all that apply? Is that talking about which patrons come into your venue, group or staff or musicians? I'm not quite clear on this one.
All of them.
Yep. All of them. Yep.
Yeah, can I just, I think last time I did a session with Creative Vic, they did mention that there's some questions in the portal that maybe seem a little at odds with the application, but due to the way the system's set up, they couldn't take them out. And from memory, that one was one that they couldn't take out, that just has to stay in there. But I would use that as an opportunity to continue to tell your story. So you might think that, if you have a really diverse range of audience and bands on different nights, then you may as well tick the boxes that apply.
Great. And really highlight that, because diversity is very, very important for this government. Diversity and inclusion and accessibility. So talk all of those up. That'll certainly aid your application. From CG, the guidelines say to provide evidence of past programming over 2019-20, including number of gigs, events, sessions, diversity of performers, average audience size. How best should this be done? Do you want every single gig done in 2019-20 in a spreadsheet? Is a doc showing flyers and past promo enough?
I would, it's more fun looking at past flyers and promos than it is spreadsheets. So I would use the visual materials, but you could put some, just very general stats into the question section. Andrew might have other thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, pretty much I agree with that. Don't waste your 2,000 characters on listing every show that you've ever had. You can, as part of your marketing materials, you could do a little spreadsheet, and if it's easily accessible information that you can actually list every show that you've had and every support band and the whole palaver, you could build that into your marketing and media materials as just a part of that overall document, which could be a PowerPoint, or it could be a Word doc with lots of pretty pictures in it as well, which I agree is good to catch the eye. Any way you can sort of find your way in, which reminds me something about your support documents. 10 is not a large number of documents, so make sure you combine don't do a separate document for your BAS and then a separate document for your financials and your profit and loss. Roll them all into one document and merge the PDF or whatever technology you're using, so that you can unlock another spot in your 10 documents for something that might help tell your story. So, make sure you merge all your documents where it's appropriate. And when you upload the documents, there's space for you to put a little description there. So when you get to that description, tell them what's in the document. So, it might be, media and marketing PDF, but put in there, incorporating photos of the venue, our programming schedule from the last year, and they go, oh, all right, well, if I'm going to go looking for something about this venue, I know where to find it in their documents. So yeah, give them every roadmap you can to finding the stuff that you want them to see. Just what I saw from Paris about venues that don't pay guarantees, that you're a room for hire and you have promoters, everyone's familiar with that model. Make sure you explain that that's how your venue operates. It's not about you paying live entertainment, $300 a night per 2-hour set or whatever. That your venue operates the way your venue operates. So again, this is why I say I think it's really important to have some sort of additional document that tells your story, that explain the type of venue you are, what your business model is, and how that allows you to support live music in the wonderful state of Victoria. Tell that story. Don't feel like you suddenly have to change your business model and start paying guarantees if your venue has been operating as a live music venue, as a room for hire, but a well-known music room for hire. Don't suddenly change your model just to fit the criteria. Be who you are.
Thanks.
You be you.
I'm just going to jump in too, because someone said that they didn't think the budget had to balance to zero, and I was just scooting through the guidelines and FAQs because I thought I found somewhere that it did say that. It says a balanced budget. So a balanced budget to me means it has to be to zero, and that's certainly Creative Victoria's usual requirements. If they have stated that it doesn't need to balance to zero, then I would go with what they would say, but that has not been my experience.
If you find on that point, if you find that you look at this and you say, well, all right, the maximum I'm allowed to get from Creative Victoria is $80,000, and it's obvious to all and sundry that that's not going to be enough to get me through, but gee, I really need that $80,000. Feel free to balance your budget by saying that you have some retained earnings in the business if you're fortunate enough to have that, or if you are prepared to, as the venue owner, to a shareholder or a director of the company that runs the venue, that you are prepared to commit to further capital injection into the business. If you can do that, and your budget shows that you need to do that, tell them that you're going to do that, because it shows a commitment that you're planning on hanging in there. Now, not some of you are undoubtedly sitting there going, well, I wish I had some money to throw into to prop up my business in this time, but I don't. Well, just apply for the money and show how you're going to spend it, but balance it out for sure.
Yeah, it definitely should not be negative. Yeah, because that will show that it's unviable. Yeah. I noticed there's another question from Adam King about in-kind section in the budget, and I'm assuming you're looking at the Creative Vic tool there. I would assume that you don't need to show in-kind support. I mean, if you have some legitimate in-kind support, you could, but that's a bit of an artifact of a project grant where Creative Vic have sort of, where their normal bread and butter grants are. So in-kind support is any contribution to the project that isn't cold hard cash, So it might be, you know, that your publicist is willing to do the work for free because they want to support you. You know, often you need to find in-kind support to prove the viability of your budget. It's not, I wouldn't see that as being a criteria here, unless you have some legitimate, worthwhile mentioning support that will increase the viability of your budget.
Yeah, you know, if you're going to rebuild your stage or something, and you know that's all going to be done by a working bee of you and your punters or something, great. Put that in, that you're going to have a $20,000 stage that's going to be built by mates. Well, great. You know, put it in. It shows that there's a community behind your venue.
Thanks, Andrew. We've only got 2 minutes left. There's just a couple more budget questions. Selene, can you read those? David Mott's asking, over what time period should the budget be framed?
You've got it shouldn't be before March of this year, and it shouldn't be after January this year. So they're the extreme ends, but you can do it over whatever period you like. So if you just want to do it from October to January, that's fine. If you've got retrospective costs that you need to pay, you can base it back to March, and you can do a combination. So that's what I did with my budget. I did most things was operating between October and January, but I had some legacy expenses I need to deal with from July to October.
Great. Okay. Desiree's asking, confirming that it's based on liquor license rather than turnover, our current expenditure exceeds the tier we currently are eligible for.
That tier is how much you up to you can apply for. So if you're
in your liquor license.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is based on the number of people, not your financial turnover. Yeah.
Any other final questions here on the budget? For a venue operating for 14 years with a P&L and balance sheet, can past invoices be submitted in place of quotes?
Yes, I mean, I wouldn't spend too much time submitting quotes and past invoices as proof. I think enough of having decent budget notes to say that this is based on, and to show that you've thought it through. I mean, that question of viability, I think they trust you, but you need to show them that you've put thought into the process and you can show viability. But otherwise, yes, you could do that.
Great. Well, thank you. We've run out of time. Anything else?
So this is one more question I think is really important. Sorry, Pat. Just what Brendan said, every venue will be loss-making this year. How can we balance to zero? It's not asking your business to balance to zero. It's just asking the budget for the grant application to balance to zero. That's a very different thing.
Yeah.
So, because you may have retained earnings, you may have a loss, but it's just having that budget to show that. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Selene and Andrew, and Bonnie and Ash. Hopefully this has been really helpful. If there's anything, so obviously you really should call or email the Creative Vic team. We've got their details up here. Before you go any further, I'd just get on the phone to them tomorrow, get a list of questions, and just clarify that you can apply, and any other specific questions about your venue. But you've got to be in it to win it, and it is a significant amount of money, so we encourage you to apply unless you're told specifically that you can't. Also, the other good news is that the federal government's about to announce $5 million in national grants. So we're hoping that Music Vic and Eamon will be running a similar panel based on those grants in a couple of weeks' time. So get these in, and then keep your pens handy and your grant writing caps on, because there's more money available to support you. So we're just going to wrap it up there and thank all of you for everything you do to contribute to Victoria being such a live music mecca. We thank Minister Foley and the state government and Creative Victoria for continuing to support live music, and we're there for you. Please keep an eye on our social media and our website page for any resources or any further grants to support you, and we're in this with you. And if you've got any other questions, get in touch with us, but please get these grants in. Let us know if there's anything we can do to help, and we'll speak to you at our next grant session, hopefully in a couple of weeks' time.
All right, just a quick one on behalf of the whole Victorian music community. Thank you, Patty. You are a champion, and Bonnie, you are also a champion, and we're really glad that we've got people like you at the coalface.
Thank you, Andrew. A lot of the people on this call were part of Save Our Scene, and we all just worked so hard together to get this money for all of you. So we would hate there to be any left over. So thank you, everyone who's really combined, and we look forward to a better year next year. And hopefully you can ride this out with this support. So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you down the track.